Hello, everyone. This is recording number 6 for Plato, a class on the Republic. Today, I want to talk about a famous conversation in Book 5 of the Republic. And it is a kind of hypothetical conversation with imagined interlocutors. Their name is the lovers of sights and sounds. And even though Plato and Socrates criticized them, they are among the most beloved characters of the Republic. A lot of readers feel they can somehow relate to them. So the lovers of sights and sounds love color, they love shape, they love artwork, they go to concerts, they love all sorts of music. They live a life immersed into the many particular beautiful things. And you might think, well, why is that so bad? But they do not acknowledge that there is such a thing as the beautiful or beauty itself. And Socrates says that on account of that way of life, of being immersed into the many beautiful things, without an acknowledgement that there is also such a thing as the beautiful, that means that they don't have any knowledge. They only have doxa, which we may translate as opinion or belief. And he says, well, they won't like this. They will be offended if we say this. And hence we maybe should try to find a way to convince them that they don't have any knowledge if they live this way. And so Socrates and his interlocutors engage in this as a hypothetical conversation with these lovers of sights and sounds, trying to show why it is that someone who lives that way doesn't have any knowledge. Now, that conversation is quite technical and fairly long. And all I want to do here is talk through the first couple of premises in a way by way of illustration to invite you to read really slowly and think about every single sentence, because Socrates moves surprisingly quickly. And nevertheless, every single premise deserves a lot of reflection. So the first premise is that knowledge is about something. And here you might think, sure, that doesn't seem contested. But Socrates follows up quickly with a question and says, well, then is it about nothing or is it about what is? And that is almost a trick question because his interlocutors are presumably these lovers of sights and sounds who are not philosophers. And how are they to know what they get themselves into when they say what they say, namely that it is about being, about what is? This is one of the weightiest notions in Plato's philosophy. And sure enough, Socrates now develops this notion of being. He says in his sort of next premise that something that is completely knowable, and what is not at all is entirely unknowable. Now, why is that a momentous moment? He introduces here a scalar notion of being. If there is such a thing as being like completely what is and completely not being, then it looks like there have to be degrees of being, degrees of what is. Something is completely and something else is not at all. And that may surprise us if we come to Plato with the kind of assumption that he is quite impressed with Parmenides, which Plato makes clear in any number of contexts. And in Parmenides, one of the most prominent ideas is that something either is or it is not. There is no mix. And there is no gradation, no intermediate mixtures or anything like this. So when Socrates says that something that is completely knowable and what is not at all is entirely unknowable, he's moving away from that kind of picture where we simply have this dichotomy between what is and what is not. And that gets him to his next premise, namely that there is going to be such a thing as what participates in being and not being. We don't just have what is and what is not. We also have what participates in being and not being. And now we have, as it were, three metaphysical categories We have what is not, and what participates in being and not being. And this kind of somewhat complicated locution, what participates in being and not being, refers to a kind of thing that in other later passages and other dialogues is called becoming. And that is maybe the more familiar phrase. But here we have this more technical phrase which flags that we are genuinely talking about something that is intermediate between and a mix of what is and what is not. So if we have these three kinds of things, and we have the premise that we introduced right at the start without flagging that it is anything special, namely that knowledge has its kind of object, it is about what is. Well, then something else has to be about this mix of what is and what is not. And of course, something yet else has to be about what is not at all. And we already know that that's ignorance. But now we get this picture where we have three metaphysical classes and three cognitive attitudes, each of them apt or suited for one of these metaphysical classes. We have ignorance, which is about, and that is a difficult idea, which is not being explained, what is not, but we can set that aside. And we have knowledge, which is of what is. And we have doxa, opinion or belief, as what is directed at and engages with what participates in being and not being. So once we have that set of ideas, we are more or less already in the position to explain why the lovers of sights and sounds don't have knowledge. They engage with these many things which are at the level of what participates in being and not being. They do not engage, they don't even acknowledge that there is such a thing as what is, because the beautiful or beauty itself would be in that category. Now, there is a lot more to say about why is it that sense perceptibles fall into that category of what participates in being and not being. Why is it that these intelligible things are understood as what is, and the beautiful is one example. So there is a lot more to say, and the conversation continues with the claim that doxa, belief or opinion, and knowledge are two powers, and they are each about their kind of object. But we already have here what are the cornerstones of the so-called Two Worlds Doctrine, which is fundamentally the view that there is a set of objects which knowledge is concerned with. And those are the knowable things, those are the intelligible things. And then we have another set of objects, and those are the things that doxa, opinion or belief, is concerned with. And there is, as it were, no overlap. Either you relate to something knowable, or you cognitively relate to something that is an opinable, something that is the object of opinion. And these distinctions between metaphysical levels and different kinds of cognitive attitudes have been debated widely among scholars. But for now, I just want to invite you to think carefully about the earliest premises, which I laid out, that knowledge is about something, namely something that is, and that there is a kind of scalar notion of being.